Good morning, everybody. It is so wonderful to be back here by our regular weekly Parsha study group, studying Rav Wolbe on Chumash. Today is a particularly sad day in my family, as my grandmother, the wife of Rabbi Wolbe, passed away late last night, early this morning. And my father and his siblings are sitting Shiva in Israel, and he will be sitting Shiva next week in New York. So I'll probably be in New York for a day or two for that. But I want to share with you a few nuggets about my grandmother and what she was about. First is, she was a very strong woman. She's a survivor. She grew up, she was born in Slobodka, which is in the Kovna region, right across the bridge from Vilnius in Lithuania, and grew up as one of, I believe, 11 children, of which only 4 made it out after the war. And I think at the age of 9, she was raising most of her younger siblings. And I had the privilege of having a very, very special relationship with my grandmother. I lived in their house for several years when I was in yeshiva, and she had a great laugh, and she was a special woman in that she, to make a great man, you need a great woman behind you who's there to create an environment that you can thrive in and that you can grow in. And my grandfather, I believe, would not have been able to excel the way he did without my grandmother by his side and taking care of everything around the house and around his life. There are many particular stories that come. I remember on one of my trips to Israel from Houston. I had a few hours one afternoon to go sit with my grandmother and just hear stories and ask her questions about what it was growing up back in her days as a child in her home. What was the environment like? So she said in her house there was no pettiness. There was no pettiness. The whole system of how people lived in that culture that she was brought up in was in the yeshiva of Slobodka. The Slobodka yeshiva, they had a motto, which was called Gadlut HaAdam, the greatness of man. Right? If we're so great, why are we being petty about little stupid things? We're so much greater than that, and we sometimes sell ourselves short. She said that was the environment in her house constantly. It was never about the small things. It was always like, just recognize how great you are, recognize how big you are, and you're far greater than you're giving yourself credit for. There's many different things that are coming to my mind, and it's obviously a time to remember a woman who really fought a great fight to be positive, to always be optimistic, and to show a world that is my father's, for example. My father said he almost never heard stories about the Holocaust from her. That was her suffering. He didn't need to suffer it as well. That was her challenge that she experienced. Not that they should know. And I believe I went with her once to Yad Vashem, and she had a very different take on Yad Vashem than most people did, because that was her. It's not like we go to Yad Vashem, we go to the Holocaust Museum, whether here in Houston, Washington, D.C., or in Israel, and we look at it, okay, this was a previous generation. For her, that was her. She was seeing her own. She actually was interviewed by Spielberg when he did that, the project of all the witnesses, people who actually went through it. So they came with the cameras into her living room and recorded her story. She was a very humble woman, She always it was very, very simple. She was never like, me? Why would anyone want to talk to me? It's like, who am I? I'm a nobody. That was her. It's like, she would go every day. She would go to a class, and she would learn a Mishnah. It was a Mishnah class for elderly women, and she would go every day. Every day she would go to her class, and she'd go. Maybe this was probably about 18 years ago. Before I got married, I was in yeshiva in Israel for a while, and I got a chance to stay by my grandparents for about 6 months, to live in their house every day. And my grandmother at that time was having some issues with her high blood pressure, so she needed someone to check her, to go with a stethoscope and check her and monitor her blood pressure. So I was the lucky, and I would come do it every day. And then we had this thing going that I was like her doctor. I'm like, the doctor's here, and she would laugh and she would laugh. So, and she was a very, very special woman, and it's funny because there were women who would come to her to seek counsel about serious matters. Like my grandfather would have people who would come to him, and people would come to my grandmother to seek advice, and she would always have that same humility. It was like, me, what can I help? I don't know what but and people would come to learn from her, and she would Shabbos afternoon she would always have people come over, and she would talk to them about the Parsha and talk to them about different things. It was just she was a very, very special woman who was here on a mission. She was here for a specific purpose, and I believe she fulfilled that purpose beautifully. I think she leaves over a fantastic legacy in her children, hopefully her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, many great-grandchildren. So, we should all merit to live a fulfilling life, and one that is on mission, and one that is hopefully an inspiration to others, and one that has God constantly present in our mind and in our actions. So I want to just relate this to Abraham. Abraham, our patriarch, is in this week's Parsha, doing what he does best, and that is bringing guests into his home and getting them involved in a conversation about God. And also, very clearly on mission, he has the test of the Akedah, which is the binding of Isaac, and just different challenges. Abraham doesn't look at it as being a challenge. Abraham looks at it as being, this is what I'm here for. And it's funny because if any of us took our problems and said, my problems are so terrible, I want to switch it with someone else's problems. Oh, I wish I had their problems, right? They say that if you sat everyone in a circle and everyone put their problems in the middle of the room, everyone would pick whichever one, a grab bag, pick whichever one you want. Everyone would take their own problems right back, because I prefer my own problems than the problems someone else has. The reason for that is because God knows us best, and God knows exactly what we're capable of, and He knows exactly what we need to reach our perfection. And we see this interesting conversation that Abraham has with God when God says, I'm going to destroy the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And he's negotiating with God. And most people say, what do you mean you're negotiating with God? God said He's destroying it, now leave Him alone, right? No, Abraham says, no. If there are 50 righteous people, would you save the city? If there are 45, 40, 30, 20, 10, there aren't 10, okay, God is destroying the city. Okay, but let me get Lot out. Lot and his family. What type of business is this? You're negotiating with God. Who negotiates with God? Well, Abraham understood his relationship with God. He understood that the relationship that we have with the Almighty is a relationship of a father and son, where you could have a discussion and you could negotiate. God may say no, but you need to be in a relationship. My grandmother always felt like she was in a relationship with God. There are many people after the Holocaust who, neglected their relationship with God and said, you know what, God turned his back on us and there is no God, or whatever it is. She couldn't fathom such thoughts. She saw God through every step of the process. She never had a question or a doubt of her emunah, of her faith. And it was real to her. She, for the last 13 years at least, since my grandfather passed away, there was one statement that always came out of her mouth, no matter who came to speak to her. And that was that Mashiach is right here. Mashiach is right here. We're going to see the Mashiach. We're going to see the coming of the Mashiach. So my blessing to everyone is that we should all merit to see the coming of Mashiach. We should all merit to see the reunification of all of those who have already passed, and all of the Jews who are spread all over the world. We should all be reunited as one family, one nation, with the recognition of the Almighty. Mezrat Hashem, we will all have a redemption from all of our suffering and all our challenges. Amen. And we should only share good news. And thank you so much for your time.